So welcome to this next instalment of the Art of Gridding series. I'm here with Paul Wilson, who's the MD of Provelio. Paul, I'm going to let you give a bit more about what Provelio is all about in a moment, but firstly just to say, thanks for having me over. I'm currently sat in the offices over in Bristol, the UK. Provelio has been on the platform for a good chunk of time now, one of the earliest users, so been hugely helpful user for us, have helped to advise in some of the early stage development of the platform. Paul, great to see you, and without any further ado, maybe you could just give everybody an overview of what you guys do.
Okay, thanks Tom. Provelio, we're sort of strategic project management consultants, really simple vision, which is changing organisations for the better. So whether we work with you for 5 minutes or 10 years, ideally what we do is come up with management ideas that help you improve your organisation. Typically strategic management of property and estates and assets, so really supporting the senior teams. Project programme portfolio management, so managing clients and groups of projects, just deliver those through. Or it might be that you just need a bit of help. You might have a shortage in resource or expertise, in which case then we'll provide you in internal support.
No, great stuff. And I think as we dive into some of the IP and the grids here, people will get a sense more from what you guys do and where your expertise lies. So if I'm going to jump now, Paul, into your account. Actually, let me just come out to your grid level. So we're in the grid library now. Actually, the grid I was going to quickly just jump into, but we'll only spend a few moments here. Was really struck when I called up with Hilary earlier how this grid has come on.
Yep.
Essentially, I guess it's your staff induction.
That's right, yeah.
Well, I'm not going to cover this in detail because actually if people are interested in the use of MethodGrid for a staff induction grid, we actually did a dedicated blog on this with the PI group in the States, and I'll put that in the notes, and if people want to look down the Art of Gridding blog series, they'll see a video interview with PI. But just to quickly jump in, I guess, just to show people how you've gone about it. I don't know if you just want to give a quick overview to the induction grid here, Paul.
Yeah, well, I think like all the benefits we found really with MethodGrid is anything that is repeatable and doable many times. You can just create a sort of structure and method around it. And also for people starting, they need to be able to hit the ground running, and we needed to get them up to speed with, if you like, the Provelio way of doing things very quickly. So we broke it down into chunks of days, they're sort of in their first 30 days, first 60 days, first 90, in their first year, second year, and then ultimately getting them, whether they be fully qualified or onto sort of further CPD if they're professionals and want to develop their career. And then, really just gone into each bit and created elements where we've made our own videos. If we've got reference works, guides or things that we've written for how we want them to behave or act as a Provelio project manager.
No, brilliant. As I say, that's another really excellent example of a staff induction use. But as I say, we've covered that in another blog. So what I would rather us focus on is, I guess, your core business really, which is helping clients embed project management disciplines. So could you talk us through this grid here? I mean, before I jump in, maybe even just position it, why it's so important. So,
typically we deliver, large and small capital projects for property and estates businesses and organisations. So it might be a new hospital, it might be a new factory, those sorts of things. And what we found is the real estate and construction process that sits under that is very repeatable, with large parts of it the same on every project, the same deliverables. But within construction at the moment is quite a clunky way of working, and also a lot of repeated mistakes that really could be quite simply taken out and made the whole process made smoother.
No, great. So with that segue, let's if we open up the grid here, if you could just maybe talk people through the sort of the high-level design.
So just looking at the stages, really. I mean, certainly within the UK, the acknowledged project stages tend to follow the RIO, the Royal Institute of British Architects, sort of stages of stage 1, 2, 3. We've introduced in some other stages that we think aren't well covered or meant to be covered in that sort of overall approach. And then what we've then done down the themes is we've identified whether it's work that the client has to do, whether it's the users who are going to end up in the building, whether it's a project management deliverable, and then that right through to the design and cost teams and other specialists that you need to involve. Now, originally this started life as 2 sort of large folders of written documentation that we captured as we went. And then what we very quickly realised is keeping that up to date, relevant, getting it linked to things on the web that are good advice or practice notes that are freely available. Indeed, linking to our own videos or good examples of work we've done. Method Grid suited us far better, and also made it available to everyone.
I'm smiling, Paul, because there's 2 huge ring binders actually on the desk here, which Hilary brought out earlier to illustrate where you came from, and I'll take a photo of those if you don't mind and put them on the blog.
No, please do.
Because I think it talks to a really, really common sort of starting point, doesn't it? Where you've built it up, but it's sort of largely become sort of shelfware, whereas now, clearly this is a very dynamic methodology capture. Yeah. No, thank you for that. And then maybe if I just jump into one of these elements.
Yeah, if you look in the project management, project execution plan.
Yeah.
It's a good starting point for any project then.
Yeah.
So again, here what we've done is we've broken down what we typically expect to see in a good execution plan. We've got links off to the RICS in terms of stakeholder engagement and commercial performance, and there's really very good websites out there that this information is available. We've got sort of internal experts that what we try and do is have one internal expert, and then we can supplement it if there's particular specialisms. And then we've got our inputs of where it would go. So we've got examples that we've done. We've got templates that project managers can use and pick up on. So anyone who starts with us would automatically know that we expect an execution plan to be done. And then we can not only tell them that, but we can also then say, this is the standard we'd expect it to be. Here's a good example of ones that we've done elsewhere.
No, great. I think people can get a sense of just how much all of these elements are sort of broadly similar sort of levels of detail. How much work has gone into.
I think one of the things I'd say is that certainly in what we do, and I would say any of the projects we've been involved in and outside of construction, 95% of this is the same on every project. So really what we're trying to do with this is free up our headspace to concentrate on what's abnormal or risky or unusual about a project, so we're not focusing on just doing the stuff that you'd always have to do anyway. So even basic things like an execution plan, why spend the time thinking about all the headings you should have in there rather than just fill in the content that's far more important under each heading.
Yeah. I think what this kind of grid capture does in spades is sort of really demonstrate Provelio's sort of centre of gravity lives in this area of expertise. And actually, interestingly, over lunch, Paul and I have been talking about future development for Method Grid, which is to sort of bring our Method Grid store to life with the offering of some of these really deep grids. And for example, Paul, I think you see Provelio pushing this grid up onto the store in the months to come when we launch that as a.
Yeah, and I think what we see with this is that we've got dozens of project managers doing hundreds of projects every year, and just having all that knowledge in one area, the demand we find from clients is that they expect projects to go smoothly, and so having the ability to not forget things or do things in the right order and ask the right questions and have a much more sort of checklist approach on the simple stuff so that you can really concentrate the brains on the clever or difficult stuff is really what the clients want in terms of value. No,
absolutely. And I think, Paul, many users of Method Grid are clearly coming at it from a sort of a project-based perspective. There's a lot of transformation project-focused organisations, not all by a long means, but there's a deep subset that are. Any sort of tips just in terms of how you went about this? I mean, clearly you had the advantage of starting from a very, very deep Provelio kind of manual and procedures, but any sort of advice as to how you either built the grid or how you've got it out into the wider team?
Yeah, I think the first thing really is just a cultural one of having people in the business that don't like making mistakes, don't like doing the same thing twice, and really just sort of come from a space of wanting to capture good knowledge. And I think that's sort of essential culturally. The next thing then really is being able to conceptualise what you do into a model, and that model becomes your method of doing things. And I think what we found was getting 3-4 really bright people in a room who've done it dozens and dozens of times, and give them the opportunity to download all of the things that are in their head. Actually, they all came out of it in a really positive mindset, because they thought, well, great, I don't have to keep thinking about that anymore or worrying that I might forget it. And I think for project managers particularly, I think the fear of forgetting something that you once knew or did is quite a frightening prospect, because the client expects you to know.
No, absolutely. And I think it's right to say that you guys are sort of on that cusp now of really confident with the capture, and you're starting to increasingly sort of roll it out to the wider Provelio delivery team. Any tips as to how you're going about that? Yeah,
well, sort of timing wise is sort of coincidental, but Friday, day after tomorrow, we've got our away day with all of the companies. So we run those 3-4 times a year, and we see Method Grid as being a real sort of one of the spines that runs through every session moving forward, where we can introduce people through the induction, the project manual, and those sort of launching the sort of new grids through those. Because I think what we're already talking about internally, even before we finished the induction and the capital projects, is we can see other grids that we want to start building. And again, it comes back to, as project managers, we think methodically. So most things we do, we try and approach the same way, whether it's business development, sales, marketing. There are lots of areas where we believe we can apply the same stuff.
No, great. And I guess just bringing this to a close, Paul, is any stepping back really from just sort of project-based grids per se, but is there any advice you would have for an early stage Method Grid user just generally, and how to sort of maintain and keep grids refreshed?
Yeah, so what we do is that we use SurveyMonkey on a sort of at each project stage, where we're sending that out to the project managers and running them through a checklist of things that we want them to remember or introduce into our sort of knowledge management systems. So just by having a quarterly or 6 monthly thing going out to all your project managers each time they're at a point on a project or an end stage, saying, tell me 5 really good things you've done, or are there any particular new services we provided, or anything you've learnt on this job technically that you haven't done before, let us know, and then we can find a home for it within Method Grid. And I think that just building in that discipline of asking your people to download stuff that is in their head is really good for you as a business and a client in terms of value, but also really good for them because their brain's not getting clogged up.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And then a question I always ask, Paul, just to bring this to a close, is as you are aware, you've had a key voice in some of the early shaping of the platform. Any kind of new features that you are particularly looking to prioritise?
Yeah, I think the key one for us now is just to show progression through. So, as distinct from like a project plan, having the ability to look on a screen and see that on the project you're on that you have done the execution plan because it's greyed out, or you have done the detailed design, immediately gives a warm feeling to you as a PM, transparency to the client and directors that people can see progress through. So for us, the progression tracking is the key thing.
No, great. And just I'll put a link in the notes below, pointing to a blog we've just written on the sort of new feature roadmap, and you'll see where that is on that set. I mean, just to sort of quickly give an answer to that, we're currently working on new folder structures, so that people with lots of grids have a much cleaner sort of grid homepage. That will be next. That may even be there already by the time people listen to this blog. Next, we're working on a search facility, which is a common request, and then we're moving to exactly that item pool. And just so people can visualise it very quickly, what we anticipate doing to facilitate that is if architects who are building out elements essentially will be able to add a new content area to their element, which we're going to call a task checklist essentially, and you can add multiple tasks to an element. It might just be a simple single one, element completed. It could have multiple subtasks. And then at this grid view, if you can imagine that you'd added 5 subtasks to this element, you'll see a progress line for actual completion, and even the ability to toggle the colour of the element a different colour to denote 100% of all tasks complete, just to give that, as you say, summary view. So, yeah.
And I think that breaking a task down into subtasks, I think on bigger elements will be really useful.
Yeah,
I think that'll be a key.
And what we see, I mean, again, as you're aware, we're not seeking to be a project management solution per se. This is very much an enterprise methodology platform, but it really lends itself to then having that PM, overlay on top of it. And what we see is quite powerful is people creating master methodologies, but then instances of that master whenever they're actually delivering it, that enables that graphical oversight. If that makes sense.
Yeah, good.
Paul, brilliant. Well, thanks again for your time. Thanks for all the support Provelio have given in terms of very constructive feedback as we've gone, and I'm sure we'll get more of that from you. If you need to know any more about Provelio, we'll put all their details up on the blog and see in the notes as well. Thanks, Paul.
Cheers, Tom.